The smallest girl's frozen fingers wrapped around his boot like a dying wish. "Please, mister," she whispered through blue lips. "Just be our daddy today, just today, before they come take us away forever." Caleb Stone hadn't touched a child in 4 years. Not since he'd buried his own daughter in Texas dirt. He should have kept riding. God help him, he should have kept riding. But behind her, 2 more girls stood shivering. 3 sisters, 3 ghosts, 3 reasons to finally stop running. 1. Welcome to our channel. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe. Stay until the very end and comment which city you're watching from. Let me know how far this story has traveled. The wind cut through Caleb Stone like a blade made of ice. His horse shifted beneath him, snorting clouds of steam into the frozen Wyoming morning. Christmas morning, he reminded himself. The day hope was supposed to come into the world. He hadn't celebrated Christmas in 4 years. "Please, mister." The voice came again, small and desperate. Caleb looked down at the child gripping his boot. Her fingers were so tiny they couldn't wrap around the worn leather properly. Blue-white at the knuckles, trembling, but refusing to let go. "Please, just be our daddy today." Behind her, 2 more girls stood at the fence post. Same brown eyes, same hollow cheeks, same terrible hope that had no business existing in a world this cruel. 3 sisters. The oldest maybe 8, the youngest barely 5. Hard to tell when hunger had stolen the softness from their faces. "Emma," the middle one whispered. "Emma, let the man go. He don't want us." "No." The first girl, Emma, shook her head fiercely. "God sent him grace. You said so yourself. You said someone was coming. You saw it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Listen here," he said, his voice rough from days without use. "I ain't nobody's answer to prayer. You girls need to get inside before you freeze to death." "Can't," Emma said simply. "What do you mean can't?" "Mama said wait by the fence. Said don't come in till she calls us." The girl's chin quivered, but she held it high. "She's been real sick. Sometimes she forgets to call." Caleb closed his eyes. "Don't do this," he told himself. "Don't you dare do this. How long you been standing out here?" The smallest girl, the one who hadn't spoken yet, held up both hands. 10 fingers spread wide. Then she folded down too. 8 hours. 8 hours in a Wyoming blizzard on Christmas morning. Christ almighty! Caleb swung down from his horse before he could stop himself. His boots hit the snow, and pain shot up through legs that had been frozen in the saddle too long. He barely felt it. "Where's your pa?" Emma's face crumpled for just a second. Then that terrible strength came back. "Daddy went to heaven," she said. 2 years ago come spring. But we don't need him no more 'cause God's sending us a new one." "Emma, stop." The middle girl, Grace, tugged at her sister's sleeve. Grace saw it in her dream. A man on a brown horse coming through the snow. He had sad eyes like Daddy used to have, and he was gonna save us. Caleb's horse was brown, and he knew exactly what kind of eyes he had. The kind that had seen too much death, the kind that couldn't look at their own reflection anymore. "I ain't here to save nobody," he said. The words came out harder than he intended. "I'm just passing through." "That's what the angel said too." Emma replied matter-of-factly. In the Christmas story, the angel was just passing through, but then he stayed 'cause Mary needed help. "I ain't no angel." "I know. Angels don't got guns." She pointed at the colt on his hip. "But cowboys do, and Daddy said cowboys are just angels with dirty boots." Something cracked inside Caleb's chest. A wall he'd built 4 years ago. A wall made of grief and guilt and 1,000 miles of running. He knelt down in the snow, bringing himself to their level. Up close, he could see the patches on their coats. Neat, careful work. The kind that spoke of a mother's love and empty pockets. "What's your mama sick with?" The shaking sickness, Emma said. She gets real hot, then real cold, then she sleeps for a long time. She paused. Doc Harrison said she needs medicine, but medicine costs money. And Mr. Garrett at the bank took all our money after Daddy died. Took it how? Said Daddy owed him. Said the farm owed him too. Said if Mama can't pay by New Year's, we gotta leave. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. He said maybe the orphan train would take us. Said sisters sometimes get to stay together. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. If they're lucky. Caleb had seen the orphan trains, watched them pull into stations across 3 territories. Children lined up like livestock, waiting for strangers to pick them, like produce at market. Sisters got separated. Almost always. Please, mister. The smallest girl finally spoke. Her voice was barely louder than the wind. We'll be real good. We won't ask for nothing. Just be our daddy today. So Mama can see we got someone. So she don't gotta worry about us when she couldn't finish. She didn't have to. Caleb understood what a 5-year-old couldn't say. So she don't gotta worry about us when she dies. What's your name, little one? Faith. Of course it was. Of course the smallest, most fragile one was named Faith. And your Grace? He looked at the middle girl. She nodded, her eyes wet. Emma, Grace, and Faith. Mama said we was her hope, Emma whispered. All 3 of us together. Hope. His daughter's name had been Hope. Caleb stood up so fast his head spun. Take me to your mama. Now. The cabin was small but well built. Caleb recognized the hand of a craftsman in the doorframe, the window casings, the way the roof pitched just right to shed snow. Whoever their daddy had been, he'd known his trade. Inside was warm. Someone had banked the fire proper. Probably Emma, judging by the soot stains on her sleeves. She'd been keeping this family alive while her mother faded. 8 years old, and she was already carrying the weight of the world. The smell of sickness hung in the air. Fever, sweat, and something worse. Something Caleb remembered from field hospitals during the war. The smell of a body fighting a battle it was losing. Mama! Emma crept toward the bed in the corner. Mama, we found him. We found our Christmas daddy. The woman on the bed stirred. Caleb made himself look at her. Martha Jane Holloway was dying. He could see it in the gray cast of her skin, the way her breathing rattled in her chest, the fever-bright eyes that struggled to focus on his face. But even now, even like this, there was something fierce in her expression. Something that refused to surrender. Who? Her voice cracked. Who are you? Name's Caleb Stone, ma'am. I was passing through when I found your girls outside. Martha's eyes snapped to her daughters with sudden, terrible clarity. Outside in this storm. Her gaze found Emma. Emma rose. I told you to stay on the porch. We did, Mama. For a while. But then Grace had her feeling, and we went to the fence to wait. And we waited and waited. And then he came. Just like Grace said he would. You waited at that fence for how long? Silence. How long? Since the sun came up, Faith whispered. But it's okay, Mama. He came. Just like Grace dreamed. Martha fell back against her pillow. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. Her hand reached out trembling, searching for something to hold. Emma grabbed it. I'm sorry, Martha breathed. I'm so sorry, babies. Mama's trying so hard to stay awake, to take care of you. But I can't keep. Her eyes found Caleb again, and something shifted in her face, recognition not of him, but of what he was. A stranger, a danger, a man in her home while she lay helpless. Get out! The words were weak, but the intent behind them was iron. Ma'am? I said get out. Martha pushed herself up on her elbows, swaying with the effort. I don't know you. I don't want your help. My girls aren't charity cases, and I won't have some drifter thinking he can... She broke off into coughing. Deep, wet, rattling coughs that shook her whole frame and left blood flecks on the handkerchief she pressed to her lips. "Mama, please." Emma was crying now. "He can help. He's got sad eyes like Daddy. Grace saw—" Grace is 7 years old. She doesn't know what men like him really want. Caleb felt the accusation like a knife between his ribs. She was right to be afraid, right to protect her children. In her position, he'd have done the same, but he couldn't leave. God help him, he couldn't leave. "Mrs. Holloway?" He kept his voice low, calm, the way he used to talk to witnesses too scared to testify. "I'm going to tell you something, and then you can decide whether I stay or go." Martha watched him with fever-bright suspicion. 4 years ago, I had a wife named Sarah and a daughter named Hope. She was 5 years old. His throat closed. He forced the words through anyway. "A gang of outlaws hit our farm while I was away. I was a deputy marshal back then, traveling to some god-forsaken town to deliver a prisoner." Martha's expression flickered. "When I came home, I found them. Both of them. I buried them in the garden where Sarah used to grow her roses." Caleb's hands were shaking. He shoved them in his coat pockets. "I burned that farm to the ground, burned my badge with it, and I've been writing ever since, running from everything, from everyone." The cabin was silent except for the crackle of the fire and Martha's labored breathing. "Your girls found me on the road, and they asked me to be their daddy, just for today." Caleb swallowed hard. "I can't be nobody's daddy, Mrs. Holloway. I proved that when I let my own daughter die alone while I was off playing lawman for strangers." Faith made a small sound, a whimper that cut through him like glass. "But I can chop your wood. I can fix whatever's broken around this place. I can make sure your girls eat something besides snow for their Christmas dinner." He met Martha's eyes directly. "And I can stand between them and whatever's coming. Because something is coming, isn't it? Something named Garrett." Martha's breath caught. "How do you know that name?" "Emma told me. Said he took your money. Said he's taking your farm." Emma talks too much. Maybe. But she also waited 8 hours in a blizzard because she believed God would send someone. Caleb paused. "I don't believe in much anymore, ma'am, but I believe that little girl believes, and I reckon that's got to count for something." Martha stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes moved from his face to her daughters huddled together by the fireplace like frightened rabbits. Emma's arm around Grace, Grace's hand clutching Faith's dress. 3 little girls holding on to each other because there was no one else to hold on to. Then Martha closed her eyes. Something in her seemed to collapse, not her body, but her resistance. The wall she'd built to keep the world out. "The medicine," she whispered. "Doc Harrison has medicine that could help. But it costs $15. I've got 2. "Where's the doctor?" "In town, 3 miles east." Caleb pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. Coins clinked inside. "I've got $18 and change. More than enough for medicine and whatever else you need." Martha's eyes flew open. "I can't take your money." "You ain't taking it, I'm giving it." "Same thing." "No, ma'am, it ain't. Taking is what Garrett does. Giving is what decent folks do." He set the pouch on the table by her bed. "And I'm trying real hard to remember how to be decent again." Martha's hand reached for the pouch, stopped. Her fingers trembled in the air between wanting and pride. "Why?" she breathed. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Caleb looked at Emma, Grace, and Faith. 3 little girls with huge brown eyes full of hope and fear and a desperate need to believe that the world wasn't as cruel as they'd learned it to be. "Because my little girl used to look at strangers the same way," he said quietly. "And I spent the last 4 years praying someone would have helped her if she'd needed it. Praying the world had at least one decent person left." He turned toward the door. "Maybe I'm just trying to be that person, even if it's too late." "Wait." Caleb stopped. Martha's voice was stronger now. Something had shifted in her, some wall coming down just enough to let a sliver of light through. "If you're going to town, you should know what you're walking into." "What do you mean?" Marcus Garrett doesn't just run the bank. He owns half the town. Sheriff's in his pocket. The dock, the general store, even the new church they're building. All his money. Martha's jaw tightened. And he killed my husband. Caleb turned back to face her. You know this for certain. My husband was a builder, best in the territory. Garrett hired him to construct the new church. Martha's voice broke on the words. But Daniel found something wrong. The materials were rotten. Cheap timber passed off as quality stock. The whole building was going to collapse probably in spring when the congregation was biggest. Your husband was going to report it. He had proof. He was going to take it to the territorial inspector. Martha's eyes went dark. And then he had an accident. Fell from a scaffold. 20 feet onto solid rock. Martha's hands clenched the blanket until her knuckles went white. They said he wasn't careful. They said he'd been drinking. Her voice cracked. Daniel never drank. Not once in 12 years of marriage. And he was the most careful man I ever knew. He had daughters. He would never risk leaving them. You said he had proof. Where is it? Martha hesitated. Her eyes darted to her children, then back to Caleb. You can trust him, Mama. Grace spoke suddenly, her voice strange and distant. I know you can. Grace, I saw it. In my dream. The man with sad eyes was going to find Daddy's hiding place. He was going to make the bad men pay. Caleb looked at the middle child. Really looked at her. Those eyes so old in such a young face. Like she'd seen things no 7-year-old should ever see. Grace sometimes knows things, Emma whispered. Things that ain't happened yet. Mama says it's just imagination, but it's not imagination. Grace's voice was flat, certain. Daddy came to me last night. He said a man was coming. He said to show him the stone. Martha made a sound like a wounded animal. Grace, baby, you can't know that. Dreams aren't the loose stone. Grace continued as if her mother hadn't spoken. Behind the fireplace. Daddy said never tell nobody. Her ancient eyes found Caleb's. But you're not nobody, mister. You're the one who's supposed to find it. The fire crackled. Wind whispered against the windows. And Caleb Stone, who had stopped believing in anything the day he buried his daughter, felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. Terrible, dangerous hope. Show me, he said. The stone came loose with a grinding sound. Behind it was a hollow space carved with the precision of a man who knew his tools. Inside was a leather satchel. Caleb pulled it out and opened it carefully. Documents spilled across the table. Receipts, invoices, drawings. And at the bottom, a leather-bound journal filled with neat handwriting and careful sketches. Daniel's journal, Martha whispered. She'd managed to sit up leaning against the headboard with Faith curled beside her. He showed me once, said it was his insurance policy. Said as long as we had it, Garrett couldn't touch us. Caleb flipped through the pages. What he found made his blood run cold. This isn't just proof of bad materials, he said slowly. Your husband documented a pattern, years of fraud, building contracts all over the territory. And look here. He pointed to a list of names. Garrett wasn't working alone. He had partners, in the territorial government, in the banks, even in the courts. Martha's face went pale. My God, your husband wasn't killed because of one church project. Caleb closed the journal carefully. He was killed because he found evidence of a criminal conspiracy that reaches all the way to the Capitol. Then we're dead. Martha's voice was hollow. If Garrett knows that journal exists, does he? He's been looking for something ever since Daniel died. He's come to the house 3 times, asking about Daniel's papers, offering to buy them, then threatening. Martha's hand found Caleb's arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Last week he gave me an ultimatum. Sell him the farm by New Year's Day, or he'll have my daughters declared wards of the territory. He's got a tame judge in Cheyenne. It's already arranged." 4 days. They had 4 days before Marcus Garrett destroyed what was left of this family. "Mama." Emma's small voice cut through the tension. "Is the bad man gonna take us away?" Martha couldn't answer. The tears were coming too fast. So Caleb did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He made a promise. "No," he said. His voice was steady as stone. "No, he ain't." "How do you know?" Caleb looked at Grace, at Emma, at Faith, 3 little girls who'd lost their father and were about to lose their mother, who'd stood in a blizzard for 8 hours because they believed a miracle was coming. And he made his choice. "Because I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow, not until this is finished." "But you said—" "I know what I said." Caleb picked up Daniel's journal and held it against his chest. "I said I couldn't be nobody's daddy. And maybe that's still true. But I can be something else." "What?" Emma asked. Caleb's jaw set into a line that would have been familiar to anyone who'd faced him when he wore a badge. "I can be the man who makes sure Marcus Garrett never hurts this family again." Martha stared at him. Her fever-bright eyes searched his face for something: lies, maybe, or weakness, or the kind of empty promises men made when they wanted something from a desperate woman. She didn't find any of those things. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph, creased and faded from years of handling. He held it out so Martha could see. A woman with kind eyes. A little girl with a gap-toothed smile. "Because 4 years ago, someone should have done this for them," he said. "Someone should have stood up. Someone should have fought. But there was no one. And I was too far away to save them." He tucked the photograph back against his heart. "I can't save them. I can't change what happened. But maybe—" His voice cracked. "Maybe I can save someone else's family. Maybe that's why I'm still breathing. Maybe that's what all this running has been for. To end up here. To find you." Grace tugged at her mother's sleeve. "I told you, Mama," she whispered. "I told you he was coming." Martha's tears fell onto Faith's hair as she held her youngest daughter close. Her eyes never left Caleb's face. "Garrett will kill you," she said quietly. "The same way he killed Daniel. Maybe. You'll die for strangers." "I died 4 years ago, ma'am." Caleb's smile was sad and strange, and somehow peaceful. "Everything since then has just been waiting. Maybe I was waiting for this. Maybe I was waiting for a reason to stop running." He knelt down in front of the bed, bringing himself to eye level with Faith. The little girl studied him with huge, solemn eyes. "You asked me to be your daddy today," he said softly. "I can't promise you that. I can't promise I'll be any good at it. The only thing I ever did right was love my little girl, and I couldn't even keep her safe." Faith reached out and touched his face. Her tiny fingers traced the lines around his eyes the grief carved into his skin. "Daddy said you was coming," she whispered. "In Grace's dream. He said you was sad 'cause you lost your baby. He said we could share." "Share what, sweetheart?" "Our love." Faith's voice was simple matter-of-fact. "Daddy said love don't run out. It just gets bigger. He said maybe you needed some and maybe we got extra, so we could share." Caleb couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but kneel there, while a 5-year-old girl offered him something he'd been running from for 4 years. A reason to live. "Faith," Martha breathed. "Baby." "It's true, Mama." Grace had moved closer, her strange eyes fixed on Caleb's face. "I saw it. In the dream. He's supposed to be here. He's supposed to stay." Emma stepped forward and took Caleb's hand in hers. Her grip was fierce, determined. "You saved us from the cold," she said. "You're going to save us from the bad man. And then—" She looked at her mother, then back at him. "And then maybe you could stay. Not forever, just till Mama gets better. Just till we're safe." 3 little girls, 3 pairs of eyes full of desperate hope, and 1 broken man who'd forgotten what hope felt like. Caleb Stone had ridden 1,000 miles to escape his past. He'd buried his heart in a grave next to his daughter's. He'd told himself he'd never feel anything again. But standing in this small cabin surrounded by strangers who needed him more than anyone had needed him in 4 years, he realized something he'd been too afraid to admit. He hadn't been running away. He'd been running toward them. "All right," he said. His voice was rough with emotion he couldn't hide. "All right, I'll stay. I'll stay as long as you need me." Emma threw her arms around his neck. Grace pressed against his side. Faith climbed into his lap and buried her face against his chest. And Martha Holloway watched from her sickbed as her daughters embraced a stranger on Christmas morning. A broken man who'd lost everything, holding onto 3 little girls like they were the only solid ground in a world that had been shifting beneath his feet for 4 years. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for stopping." Caleb looked at her over her daughters' heads. "Thank your girls. They're the ones who wouldn't let go." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside that small cabin, something had changed. Something had begun. And somewhere in town, Marcus Garrett was about to learn that the Holloway family wasn't alone anymore. The war was coming. But for now, just for this one moment, there was peace. There was hope. There was the beginning of something that felt almost like family. Martha fell asleep shortly after exhaustion and fever finally pulling her under. Caleb sat by the fire, Daniel's journal in his hands, while the girls curled up on a mattress near their mother's bed. Emma fell asleep almost immediately. Faith followed minutes later, her thumb in her mouth, her other hand clutching the hem of her sister's dress. But Grace lay awake, watching him. "Mister?" "Yeah." "Your little girl, the one who died?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "What was her name?" Caleb's throat tightened. "Hope." "That's pretty." Yeah, it was. "Do you still love her?" The question hit him like a physical blow. So simple, so devastating. "Every day," he managed. "Every single day." Grace nodded slowly as if this confirmed something she already knew. "Daddy says love don't stop just 'cause someone's gone. He says it just changes shape, gets bigger. Maybe big enough to hold new people." Caleb stared at her. "Your daddy told you this?" "In my dream, last night." Grace's eyes were ancient in her small face. "He said you was coming. He said you lost your hope. He said maybe you could borrow ours for a while." Borrow ours. Borrow hope. Caleb looked at this strange, quiet child who dreamed of dead men and saw too clearly into hearts that had nothing left to hide. "Go to sleep, little one," he said softly. "Okay." She closed her eyes obediently. Then just before sleep took her, "Mister, yeah. I'm glad you stopped running." The fire popped. The wind howled. And Caleb Stone sat in the darkness, holding a dead man's journal, and wondering if maybe he hadn't been running away from something all these years. Maybe he'd been running toward this. Morning came gray and bitter. Caleb hadn't slept. He'd spent the night reading Daniel Holloway's journal by firelight, page after page of meticulous documentation that painted a picture of corruption so vast it made his stomach turn. Building contracts with falsified materials. Inspection reports signed by officials who'd never visited the sites. Money flowing through shell companies and disappearing into accounts that led straight to the territorial capital. Daniel Holloway hadn't just been a builder. He'd been a witness to an empire of theft and lies. And he'd died for it. The fire had burned low when Caleb heard Martha stirring. He closed the journal and turned to find her watching him, her fever-bright eyes clearer than they'd been the night before. "You stayed," she said. I did. Most men would have taken that journal and run, sold it to Garrett for enough money to disappear. Caleb met her gaze steadily. I ain't most men. Martha studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw made something shift in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become trust if he earned it. The girl's still sleeping. Caleb nodded toward the mattress where Emma, Grace, and Faith lay tangled together like puppies seeking warmth. They had a hard day yesterday. They've had a hard 2 years. Hard. The words hung between them, heavy with everything they implied. Mrs. Holloway, Martha. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the effort. If you're going to war for my family, you might as well use my Christian name. Martha, then. Caleb leaned forward, the journal balanced on his knee. I need to know everything. Not just what's in these pages, but what happened after Daniel died. Who came to you? What they said? What they threatened? Martha's jaw tightened. Why? Because I used to be a deputy marshal. I know how men like Garrett operate. They don't just kill their enemies, they destroy them. Make them look guilty of something so nobody asks questions. He paused. What did Garrett say your husband was guilty of? Martha's hands twisted in the blanket. Drinking, she said quietly. They said Daniel was drunk when he fell. Said they'd found whiskey bottles in his workshop. But Daniel didn't drink. Never touched the stuff. His father was a drunk. Beat his mother half to death before he ran off. Daniel swore he'd never be like that. Martha's voice cracked. He kept that promise for 34 years, and they made him into a liar with a single planted bottle. Caleb nodded slowly. What else? They said he'd been stealing from the church fund, skimming materials, selling them on the side. Martha's eyes flashed with sudden fierce anger. My husband who couldn't tell a lie to save his life, who gave away more than we could afford because he couldn't stand seeing people go without. They turned him into a thief. Did anyone believe it? Some did, the ones who wanted to. Martha looked away. It's easier to believe a dead man was corrupt than to face the truth about the living ones running your town. Caleb understood. He'd seen it before, the way communities closed ranks against uncomfortable truths, choosing comfortable lies over justice that might cost them something. And the ones who didn't believe it. They're scared. Martha's voice dropped. Agnes Cooper at the general store, she was my friend. Still is, I think. But she can barely look at me when I come to town. Her husband owes money to Garrett's bank. One wrong word, and they lose everything. The preacher, Reverend Miller. He's new, came about 3 years ago. Martha hesitated. I think he suspects something's wrong. But the church is being built with Garrett's money. Hard to bite the hand that's raising your steeple. And the sheriff. Something complicated moved across Martha's face. Wade Brennan. He was Daniel's best friend since childhood. Stood up at our wedding. Held Emma the day she was born. He's still family, I suppose. But family doesn't mean much when Garrett's got your livelihood in his pocket. Martha's voice turned bitter. Wade came to see me after Daniel died. Stood right there in that doorway and told me he was sorry. Then he told me there wouldn't be an investigation. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. He said that directly. He said the evidence was clear, said pursuing it further would only hurt me and the girls, said I should take whatever Garrett offered and start fresh somewhere else. Martha laughed, but there was no humor in it. Start fresh, with 3 children, no money, and a reputation as the widow of a thief and a drunk. Where exactly was I supposed to start fresh? You didn't leave. No, I didn't leave. Martha's chin lifted. This is my home. Daniel built it with his own hands, every board, every nail, every stone in that fireplace. My girls took their first steps on these floors. I'll die before I let Marcus Garrett take it from us. The words echoed in the small cabin, fierce and final. Caleb looked at this woman, sick, exhausted, barely able to sit up, and saw something that reminded him painfully of Sarah. That same stubborn strength. That same refusal to bend. It had gotten Sarah killed. He wouldn't let it kill Martha. "I'm going to town," he said, standing, "to get your medicine, and to do some looking around. Garrett will know you're here by now. His men watch the roads." "Good." Caleb checked the rounds in his Colt, the motion smooth and automatic. "Let him wonder. He'll come for you. I'm counting on it." Martha's eyes widened. "You want him to come?" "I want him to make a mistake." Caleb slid the gun back into its holster. Men like Garrett, they're used to operating in the shadows, used to having everything go their way. When something unexpected happens, they get nervous, and nervous men make errors. And what happens when he doesn't make an error? What happens when he just sends someone to kill you like he killed Daniel? Caleb paused at the door. "Then at least your girls will know someone tried." He glanced back at her. "That's more than my daughter got." He was out the door before Martha could respond. The cold hit him like a fist. His breath crystallized in the air, and the snow creaked beneath his boots as he walked toward the barn where he'd stabled his horse the night before. The mare whickered when she saw him, tossing her head in greeting. "Easy, girl." Caleb ran his hand along her neck. "We've got work to do." He was saddling her when he heard the footsteps. Small, quick, trying to be quiet, and failing. "I know you're there," he said without turning around. Silence. Then, "How'd you know?" Caleb turned to find Emma standing in the barn doorway, wrapped in a coat 2 sizes too big. "I used to track outlaws for a living. A little girl ain't exactly a challenge." Emma's face fell. "I was trying to be sneaky." "Why?" "'Cause Mama said I wasn't supposed to bother you." Caleb felt something twist in his chest. "You ain't bothering me." Emma brightened immediately. She crept closer, her eyes fixed on the horse. "What's her name?" "Haven't given her one." "Why not?" "Never saw the point. She's just transportation." Emma looked at him like he'd said something deeply sad. "Everything deserves a name," she said seriously. "Names mean you matter. That's what Daddy used to say." Caleb's hands stilled on the saddle straps. "Your daddy said a lot of things." "He was real smart." Emma moved closer, reaching out to touch the horse's nose with careful reverence. "He could build anything. Houses, barns, furniture. Once he made Grace a dollhouse that had real little windows that opened. It was the prettiest thing I ever saw." "What happened to it?" Emma's face shadowed. "Mr. Garrett's men came after Daddy died. Said they were looking for papers. They broke a lot of stuff." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They broke the dollhouse." Caleb's hands clenched on the leather straps. "Did they find what they were looking for?" "No." A tiny smile crossed Emma's face. "Grace showed him the wrong hiding spot. Daddy had 3. She showed him the one with just old letters in it. They took everything, but it wasn't the important stuff." "Smart kid." All 3 of them were smart kids. "Emma, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "While I'm in town, I need you to look after your mama and your sisters. Can you do that?" Emma's chest puffed with importance. "I always look after them." "I know you do. But today, especially. Don't let anyone in the house except me. If strangers come, you hide with Grace and Faith in that back corner by the flour barrel. You understand?" Emma's eyes went wide. "You think the bad men are coming?" "I think we should be ready in case they do." Emma nodded slowly, her small face setting into lines of determination that looked wrong on someone so young. "Okay," she said. "I'll protect them." "Good girl." Caleb swung up into the saddle and looked down at her. "One more thing." "What?" "Her name is Hope." Emma blinked. "The horse." "Yeah." Caleb's throat felt tight. "After someone I used to know." Emma's face broke into a radiant smile. "That's a good name," she said. "Real good." Caleb turned Hope toward the road and didn't look back. If he had, Emma might have seen the tears freezing on his cheeks. The town of Cedar Falls emerged from the winter landscape like a wound in the snow. Maybe 200 souls, Caleb estimated, enough for a main street, a church steeple rising against the gray sky, and the usual collection of businesses that kept frontier communities breathing. The general store, the saloon, the bank. He noted the bank's position instinctively. 2 stories brick construction, the kind of building that announced its owner had more money than sense or taste. The name Garrett and Associates gleamed in gold letters above the door, subtle as a rattlesnake. Caleb tied Hope to the hitching post outside the general store and went inside. The warmth hit him first, then the smell of coffee and tobacco and 100 different goods crammed into a space too small to hold them properly. A woman behind the counter looked up at his entrance, her expression shifting from welcome to wariness in the span of a heartbeat. "Help you?" "Looking for Doc Harrison's place." 3 doors down. The woman, Agnes Cooper, if Martha's description was accurate, studied him with sharp eyes. "You new in town?" "Just passing through." She didn't believe him. "Lot of people pass through Cedar Falls. Not many stop in the middle of a blizzard." "Not many have a choice when the storm hits." "Suppose not." Agnes glanced toward the window. Caleb followed her gaze to see 2 men standing outside the bank watching the general store with undisguised interest. "You might want to make your business quick, mister. Passing through is healthier when you don't linger." Caleb touched the brim of his hat. "Appreciate the advice, ma'am." "Don't appreciate it. Follow it." He left without responding, but he filed away the interaction. Agnes Cooper was scared, but she wasn't broken. That might prove useful. Doc Harrison's office was exactly where Agnes had said it would be, a narrow building squeezed between the barbershop and a lawyer's office that looked like it hadn't seen a client in months. Caleb pushed open the door and found himself in a cramped waiting room that smelled of carbolic acid and camphor. "Doctor," he called out. A curtain at the back parted, and a man emerged, short, balding, with the permanently exhausted expression of someone who'd seen too much suffering and couldn't afford to stop seeing more. "I'm Harrison. What do you need?" "Medicine for Martha Holloway." The doctor's face changed, hardened, closed. "You're the one." "The one what?" "The one staying at the Holloway place." Harrison's voice dropped. "Word travels fast in small towns, mister. Especially when the word involves a widow and a stranger." Caleb ignored the implication. "She's got fever, bad cough, blood in her handkerchief." Harrison's expression sobered. "How long since it started?" "Week or more, according to her girls." "And you're just now coming for medicine?" "I just got there last night." The doctor grunted and disappeared behind the curtain. Caleb heard drawers opening, bottles clinking. Harrison emerged with a brown paper package that he set on the counter. "Quinine for the fever, laudanum for the pain, and this," he held up a smaller bottle, "is for the cough. 3 drops in warm water twice a day. More than that will kill her." "How much?" $15. Caleb counted out the coins and pushed them across the counter. Harrison made them disappear with practiced efficiency. "That'll keep her comfortable," the doctor said quietly. "But I won't lie to you, mister. Whatever she's got, it's taken hold deep. Without proper rest, proper food, proper care. She'll have all of that." Harrison studied him. "You sound like a man making promises he might not be able to keep." "Then I reckon I better keep them." The doctor held his gaze for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face. Not quite trust, but something close to it. "The Holloway woman," Harrison said slowly. "She's a good woman. Didn't deserve what happened to her husband. Didn't deserve what's happening to her now. No, she didn't. Marcus Garrett has his eye on that property. Has for years." Harrison paused. "That land sits right on top of what surveyors say might be the richest silver deposit in the territory." Caleb went very still. "Silver? Not everyone knows it. Daniel Holloway found traces in his creek last spring. made the mistake of filing a report with the Territorial Assayer's Office. Harrison's voice dropped. 3 weeks later, he was dead. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about silencing a witness to crooked building contracts. This was about land, mineral rights, the kind of wealth that made men into monsters and monsters into pillars of the community. Who else knows about the silver? Garrett, his partners, the territorial governor probably. Harrison paused. And now you. Why are you telling me this? Because someone needs to do something, and the rest of us are too afraid to try. Harrison's eyes were old and tired and full of a shame that had been festering for years. I watched them carry Daniel Holloway's body out of that building site. I saw the wounds. I know a fall doesn't leave marks like that. You could testify. I could also end up like Daniel. Harrison shook his head. I've got a wife, grandchildren in California. I'm not brave, mister. I'm just tired of pretending I don't see what's right in front of my face. Caleb gathered the medicine and tucked it inside his coat. What you just told me, you understand I'm going to use it. I understand, and Garrett will know someone talked. Harrison smiled grimly. I've got a gun too, mister, and I've been a coward long enough. Maybe it's time to see what being brave feels like before I die. Caleb nodded once, then turned toward the door. Mister, he paused. What's your name, in case anyone asks later who started this particular fire? Stone, Caleb Stone. Well, Mr. Stone, God be with you. Harrison's voice was soft. You're going to need him. Caleb stepped out into the cold and found Marcus Garrett waiting for him. The man was exactly what Caleb had expected. Well-fed, expensively dressed with the kind of smooth confidence that came from years of getting everything he wanted without consequences. Two men flanked him, hired muscle by the look of them, their hands resting casually near their holsters. Mr. Stone. Garrett's voice was warm and welcoming as a snake's embrace. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Can't say the pleasure's mine. Garrett's smile didn't waver. Now, that's hardly the way to greet a pillar of the community. I'm Marcus Garrett. I understand you're staying at the Holloway place. Word travels fast. In a small town it does. I like to keep abreast of new developments, especially ones involving properties that interest me. Garrett's eyes were cold despite his warm manner. The Holloway farm is such a property. Mrs. Holloway and I have been negotiating. That what you call it, negotiating? Something flickered in Garrett's expression. I call it helping a widow in need. She's alone sick with 3 small children. That farm is too much for her. I've offered her a fair price. You've offered her robbery. The words hung in the frozen air. Garrett's smile finally died. I'd be careful, Mr. Stone, throwing accusations around in a town where you don't know anyone and no one knows you. I know enough. Do you? Garrett stepped closer. You know that Martha Holloway's husband was a drunk and a thief, that he died because he was careless and corrupt, that the widow's been barely scraping by, unable to pay her debts, unable to care for her children properly. I know that every word you just said is a lie. Garrett's eyes went flat, cold, empty of anything human. I'd be very careful about making enemies here, Mr. Stone, very careful indeed. Caleb stepped forward until he was close enough to see the pulse jumping in Garrett's throat. I've been careful for 4 years, he said quietly. Careful got my family killed. Careful kept me running while men like you destroyed innocent lives. I'm done being careful. Garrett's men shifted hands, moving toward their weapons. Caleb didn't flinch. Call off your dogs, he said, unless you want them to learn what a former deputy marshal does to men who threaten him. The word marshal rippled through the group like a stone dropped in still water. Garrett's face tightened. Former lawman, are we? Now I'm just a man who doesn't like bullies. Caleb held Garrett's gaze. You've got 4 days before New Year's. That's 4 days for me to find enough evidence to hang you. I suggest you spend them getting your affairs in order. He walked past Garrett without waiting for a response, mounted Hope, and rode out of town. His back prickled the whole way, waiting for a bullet that never came. But he knew it would, eventually. Men like Marcus Garrett didn't let challenges stand. Caleb had just painted a target on his own back. Now he had to make sure it stayed there and away from Martha and her girls. The real war was about to begin. Martha was sitting up when Caleb returned. The medicine had already started working its small miracle. Color had crept back into her cheeks, and her breathing came easier without that terrible rattling that had kept him awake through the night. She watched him stomp snow from his boots, her eyes sharp and searching. "You're alive," she said, disappointed, surprised. Martha accepted the medicine he handed her, turning the bottles over in her hands. "Word came while you were gone. Agnes Cooper sent her boy with a message." "What message?" "Garrett knows who you are. A deputy marshal who went mad after his family died. He's telling everyone you're dangerous, unstable." Martha paused. "He says you burned down your own home with your wife and daughter inside." Caleb felt the words like a knife between his ribs. "That's a lie." "I know it is." Martha's voice was steady. "A man who burned his family wouldn't cry in his sleep the way you did last night." Caleb stiffened. "You heard that." "I hear everything in this house. Walls are thin." She set the medicine bottles on the table beside her bed. "You called out for someone named Hope. You begged her to run." The cabin felt suddenly airless. "I don't want to talk about that." "Then we won't." Martha pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "But you should know what you're fighting. Garrett doesn't just destroy people, he destroys their names. Their memories. Everything they were. He did it to Daniel. He's doing it to me now, and he'll do it to you if you stay." "Where are the girls?" "Barn. Emma decided your horse needed company." Martha almost smiled. "She's named her Hope, apparently. Says you said it was after someone important." "It was. Your daughter." Caleb didn't answer. Martha let the silence stretch for a moment, then shifted direction with the practiced ease of a woman who understood when to push and when to retreat. "What did you learn in town?" "Garrett's not just after your farm, because Daniel knew about his crooked building contracts." Caleb turned to face her. "He's after what's under it." Martha's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Silver. Daniel found traces in your creek, filed a report with the territorial assayer." Caleb paused. 3 weeks before he died. The color that had returned to Martha's face drained away. "Daniel never told me about silver. Probably trying to protect you. If you didn't know, you couldn't be threatened for the information." Caleb pulled Daniel's journal from his coat. "But he wrote about it in here. Page 43. He knew exactly what your land was worth, and he knew Garrett would kill for it." Martha's hands trembled as she took the journal and found the page. Her eyes moved across her husband's careful handwriting, and tears began to slide down her cheeks. "He was going to surprise us," she whispered. "That's what he said the week before he died. He said he had a surprise that would change everything. I thought he meant something he was building." "He was building something. A future." Caleb's voice was gentle. "Garrett took it from him." Martha pressed the journal against her chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Caleb wanted to comfort her, wanted to say something that would ease the fresh wound of learning exactly how calculated her husband's murder had been. But he'd never been good with words. Sarah used to tease him about it, said he could face down armed criminals without flinching, but couldn't string together a decent compliment to save his life. So he did what he knew how to do. "I sent a telegram from town," he said. "To a U.S. Marshal I used to know in Denver. Man named Dawkins. If he's still alive and still wearing the badge, he'll come." Martha looked up, hope and fear warring in her expression. "How long?" 3 days, maybe 4. "New Year's Eve is in 3 days." "I know." "Garrett's deadline." "I know the timing." Caleb's voice came out harder than he intended. "I know what's at stake. I know we're racing against something that might be unwinnable. But I don't know how to do nothing." I tried that for 4 years and it nearly killed me. Martha stared at him for a long moment. You really think we can beat him? I think we have to try. The cabin door burst open. Emma came running in. Her face flushed with cold and something else. Fear. Mama! Mama, there's men coming! Caleb was at the window before Emma finished speaking. 3 riders approaching from the east, moving fast despite the snow. He couldn't see their faces yet, but he recognized the body language, men with purpose, men with violence on their minds. Martha, take the girls to the back, behind the flour barrel like I told Emma. Caleb, now. Martha didn't argue. She pulled herself from the bed with strength she probably didn't know she still had. Grabbed Faith from where she'd been dozing by the fire and shepherded all 3 girls toward the back of the cabin. Caleb checked his Colt. 6 rounds. His rifle was by the door, another 8 rounds there. 14 shots against 3 men, better odds than he deserved. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch just as the riders pulled up at the fence line. The man in front was big, broad-shouldered, with a face that had been broken and badly reset at least once. The 2 behind him were younger, leaner, with the hungry look of men who'd learned that violence paid better than honest work. That's far enough, Caleb called out. The big man grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. You stone. Who's asking? Name's Cobb. I work for Mr. Garrett. Cobb leaned forward in his saddle. Mr. Garrett says you need to leave. Says the lady inside has business to conclude, and you're interfering with negotiations. Negotiations are over. Mr. Garrett disagrees. Cobb's grin widened. He also says if you don't leave peaceful-like, we're authorized to make you leave. Caleb's hand rested on his holster. Casual, but ready. 3 of you against 1 of me. You like those odds? Like 'em fine. Then you don't know what I used to do for a living. Something flickered in Cobb's expression. The story Garrett had spread was clearly incomplete. Mr. Garrett says you're crazy. Says you burned your own family. Mr. Garrett's a liar, but you probably knew that already working for him. Cobb's jaw tightened. I don't get paid to think. I get paid to solve problems. Right now, you're a problem. Then come solve me. The words hung in the frozen air. The 2 younger men exchanged nervous glances. They hadn't expected resistance. Hadn't expected a lone man to face down 3 armed riders without flinching. Cobb wasn't nervous, but he was reassessing. You know what happens if you start shooting out here, Cobb said slowly. Sheriff Brennan comes to investigate. Finds a dead drifter on a widow's property. Maybe he finds other things too. Things that don't look good for the lady. Or her girls. Or maybe he finds 3 dead men who tried to force their way onto property where they weren't wanted. Caleb's voice didn't change. That's not murder, Cobb. That's self-defense. Any jury in the territory would agree. You'd hang for it. Might be worth it. Cobb studied him for a long moment. You really are crazy. I'm a father who lost his daughter. Caleb drew his pistol in one smooth motion, the barrel leveling at Cobb's chest before any of the 3 could react. That's worse than crazy. That's got nothing left to lose. Nobody moved. The wind whistled through the silence. Then slowly, Cobb raised his hands. Easy there, Stone. Nobody needs to die today. Then ride. Cobb turned his horse, gesturing for his men to follow. This ain't over, he called back. Mr. Garrett always gets what he wants. Always. Not this time. The 3 riders disappeared down the road, their hoofbeats fading into the winter quiet. Caleb didn't holster his weapon until they were completely out of sight. You can come out now, he said. The cabin door creaked open. Martha appeared, her face pale, but her eyes burning with something that might have been admiration. You just faced down 3 armed men. They weren't expecting a fight. Bullies never do. They'll come back. I know. With more men, with guns blazing. They'll burn this place down with us inside if they have to. Probably. And you're still staying. Caleb finally holstered his pistol. I told you before. I'm done running. Martha was quiet for a moment. My husband said something like that once, the night before he died. Her voice cracked. He said some things were worth dying for. I told him nothing was worth leaving our daughters without a father. What did he say? He said some things were worth dying for because they were about more than just him. They were about what kind of world our daughters would grow up in. Martha wiped her eyes. I hated him for that, for being willing to die for principle when I needed him to live for us. Caleb understood. God help him, he understood completely. Martha, I don't hate you, she continued, for doing what he did, for being willing to fight when running would be safer. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting for control. I can't watch another good man die for my family. I can't. Then don't watch. Martha looked at him. I'm not asking you to watch. I'm not asking you to do anything except keep those girls safe and let me handle what's coming. Caleb met her eyes steadily. I know what I'm risking. I know the odds. But Martha, I've spent 4 years wishing I'd been home when those outlaws came. Wishing I'd died instead of Sarah and Hope. Wishing I'd had the chance to fight for them. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. You're giving me that chance. A chance to be there when it matters. A chance to fight for something instead of running from everything. Even if I die doing it, that's more than I've had in 4 years. Martha's tears fell freely. That's a terrible reason to stay. Maybe, but it's the only one I've got. The cabin door opened again, and Grace appeared, her small face solemn and pale. Mama, she said quietly. The bad men are coming back. Caleb spun toward the road. Nothing. Empty snow and gray sky. Grace, there's nobody. Not now. The little girl's eyes were distant, unfocused. Tonight, when the moon rises, a lot of them. Martha's hand found Caleb's arm, her grip tight with fear. She does this sometimes, she whispered. Sees things before they happen. Daniel thought she was gifted. I thought she was just imaginative. But she's never been wrong. Caleb looked at the child, at those ancient eyes in that young face. How many men, Grace? 7. Her voice was flat, emotionless. 7 men with fire. What else do you see? Grace's gaze drifted past him toward something invisible. Snow. Red snow. And screaming. Her lower lip trembled. So much screaming. Then she blinked, and the spell broke. She was just a little girl again, frightened and cold, reaching for her mother. Martha gathered her up, pressing kisses to her hair. It's okay, baby. It's okay. We're going to be fine. But her eyes met Caleb's over her daughter's head, and he saw the terror there. 7 men. Tonight. The telegram to Marshal Dawkins wouldn't reach Denver until tomorrow at the earliest. Even if Dawkins dropped everything and rode hard, he couldn't arrive before New Year's Eve. They were on their own. I need to fortify this cabin, Caleb said quietly. Can your girls shoot? Martha's face went rigid. They're children. They're targets. Tonight when those men come, they'll be targets. I'm not saying give them guns. I'm saying, can they run? Can they hide? Can they survive if things go bad? Martha was silent for a long moment. Emma can shoot. Daniel taught her last summer. She's not good, but she knows which end is which. Martha's voice shook. Grace won't touch guns. She says they make her head hurt. And Faith is 5 years old, Caleb. Then Faith hides. Emma stays with you. I'll face them outside. Alone. Inside this cabin we're trapped. Outside I can move. Pick them off before they can organize. 7 men, Caleb. You said it yourself, you've got 14 shots. Then I better not miss. Martha set Grace down and stepped toward him, her face fierce with desperation. This is suicide. You know that, don't you? You're planning to die so we can live. I'm planning to fight. The dying part is just a possibility. Caleb. He caught her hands in his, surprising them both. "Martha, listen to me. 4 years ago, I wasn't there when my family needed me. I've been carrying that guilt every day since. Every mile I rode, every drink I drank, every time I thought about eating my own gun, it was all because I couldn't be there." His grip tightened. "Tonight, I get to be there. Whatever happens, I get to stand between evil and innocent children and say, not today. Maybe I'll live, maybe I won't, but I will not run. Do you understand? I cannot run. Not again." Martha's tears dripped onto their joined hands. "Then we fight together." "Martha?" "No." Her voice hardened with the same steel he'd heard when she talked about her land and her husband's memory. "You don't get to make noble sacrifices while I cower inside with my children. Daniel did that. He went alone, kept me safe and ignorant, and he died alone. I won't let that happen again. You're sick." "I'm better. The medicine helped." Martha squeezed his hands. "And I'm a better shot than Emma. Daniel taught me before he taught her. If 7 men are coming to burn my home and take my children, I will stand on that porch with a rifle and shoot until I can't shoot anymore." Her chin lifted. "That's not negotiable." Caleb stared at her. This woman, this impossible, stubborn, beautiful woman who refused to bend even when bending would save her life. "Fine," he said finally. "We fight together." Martha nodded once. "What do we do first?" Caleb released her hands and moved toward the door. "First we prepare. Move anything flammable away from the walls. Fill every bucket with water. Board up the windows we can't cover with gunfire." He paused at the threshold. "And then we wait for moonrise." Outside, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon. They had maybe 4 hours until dark. 4 hours to prepare for war. 4 hours until everything changed. The afternoon passed in grim preparation. Caleb showed Martha how to position herself by the window for maximum cover and minimum exposure. He reinforced the door with the cabin's only table, wedging it against the frame, at an angle that would force anyone trying to enter to push through a barrier while exposing themselves to fire. Emma helped without being asked, her small hands carrying buckets and blankets with fierce determination. Faith clung to Grace, watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. "Mama," Faith whispered, "I'm scared." Martha knelt down and pulled her youngest into her arms. "I know, baby. I'm scared too. Are the bad men gonna hurt us?" "No." Martha's voice was fierce. "No, they're not. Mr. Stone is going to protect us." "Promise?" Martha looked up at Caleb, her eyes searching his face. He met her gaze and nodded once. "Promise," Martha said. Grace sat by the fire, her sketchbook clutched to her chest. She hadn't spoken since her vision, but her pencil moved across the paper with an intensity that made Caleb's skin prickle. "Grace." He crouched down beside her. "What are you drawing?" She didn't answer, just kept drawing. Caleb looked at the page and felt his blood go cold. It was him. Unmistakably him, rendered in the simple strokes of a child's hand. He stood in front of the cabin, guns in both hands, facing a semicircle of dark figures. And behind him, barely visible through a doorway, were 4 figures watching. Martha, Emma, Grace, Faith. "Is this what you see coming?" he asked quietly. Grace nodded. "Does he—" Caleb couldn't finish the question. Grace looked up at him with those ancient, sorrowful eyes. "Some things I can't see," she said softly. "Some things ain't decided yet." Some things ain't decided yet. That would have to be enough. The sun sank lower, the shadows grew longer, and somewhere out there, 7 men were preparing to destroy everything Caleb had just found. "Girls," Martha's voice cut through the tension. "Come eat something." Emma looked up from where she'd been stacking blankets near the back corner. "I ain't hungry, Mama." "I don't care. Eat anyway. You need your strength." It was the kind of thing mothers said, the kind of thing Sarah used to say to Hope when she was being stubborn about supper. The memory hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. "You too," Martha said, and it took him a moment to realize she was talking to him. "I'm fine. You haven't eaten since yesterday." She handed him a plate of cold biscuits and dried meat. "Eat. That's not negotiable either." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. They ate in silence, the four of them gathered around the table, while Faith sat in Martha's lap, too scared to let go of her mother. The food tasted like sawdust, but Caleb forced it down anyway. Martha was right. He needed his strength. "Mr. Stone." He looked up to find Emma watching him, her biscuit untouched in her hand. "Yeah. Are you gonna die tonight?" The question hung in the air. Martha made a small sound of protest, but Caleb held up his hand. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe. But I'm gonna try real hard not to." "Because you promised." "Because I promised." Emma nodded slowly, as if this answer satisfied her. Then she took a bite of her biscuit and chewed with solemn determination. "Daddy died," she said, her mouth still full. "He promised he'd come home, and then he died." "Emma," Martha's voice was sharp. "That's enough." "It's okay." Caleb leaned forward, his eyes on Emma's face. "What happened to your daddy wasn't his fault. Bad men hurt him. He wanted to come home, I know he did. Sometimes promises get broken, even when we don't want them to. But you're not going to let the bad men hurt you. I'm going to do everything I can to stop them. Because you're a cowboy, and cowboys are angels with dirty boots." Caleb's throat tightened. "Something like that." Emma reached across the table and put her small hand on his. "I believe you," she said. "I believe you're going to keep us safe." Faith wiggled out of Martha's lap and came around the table. Before Caleb could react, she'd climbed into his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I believe you too," she whispered against his shoulder. Grace didn't move from her seat, but she looked up from her drawing and met his eyes. "I saw it," she said quietly. "I saw you standing. At the end, I saw you standing." Martha's hand found his across the table. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but her grip was strong. "Then we believe too," she said. Caleb looked at them. This family that wasn't his family, these children who weren't his children, this woman who wasn't his wife, and felt something crack open inside him that had been sealed shut for 4 years. "I'm gonna do right by you," he said. His voice was rough with emotion he couldn't hide. "All of you. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me a reason to stop running." "What reason?" Faith asked, her face pressed against his neck. "Hope," Caleb said. "You gave me back hope." The moon rose at 7. Caleb watched it from the porch, his breath crystallizing in the bitter air. The cold was savage, the kind that could kill a man in hours if he didn't keep moving. But he couldn't afford to move. Every step he took was one more sound that might give away his position. Martha was inside with the girls, all 3 of them positioned by the back window, where they could escape into the woods if things went badly. Caleb had made Martha promise to run if he fell. She'd promised. He didn't believe her. The first rider appeared at 8. Then a second. Then a third. By the time they'd all assembled at the fence line, Caleb counted exactly 7 men, just as Grace had predicted. They carried torches that flickered orange against the blue-white snow, and he could see rifles slung across their backs. They weren't here to negotiate. Cobb was among them. He sat his horse at the center of the line, grinning that tobacco-stained grin. "Stone," he called out. "You still in there?" Caleb didn't answer. "Mr. Garrett's given you one last chance. Ride out now, and nobody has to get hurt. Stay and we burn that cabin to the ground with everyone inside." Silence. "Suit yourself." The riders began to spread out, flanking the cabin on both sides. Standard intimidation formation: surround the target, cut off escape routes, then close in. Caleb had seen it before. He'd also seen it fail. He raised his rifle, sighted on the torchbearer farthest to the left, and fired. The shot cracked through the frozen air like thunder. The man screamed, dropping his torch as he clutched his shoulder. The torch hissed as it hit the snow, extinguishing instantly. 6 torches left. Chaos erupted. The riders scattered their formation, breaking as they sought cover that didn't exist in the flat open ground around the cabin. Caleb fired again, catching a second man in the thigh. The horse reared, throwing its rider into a snowbank. 5 torches. Return fire began. Bullets thudded into the cabin walls, whistled past Caleb's head. He dropped behind the porch railing, reloading with hands that had forgotten how to tremble. "Inside!" he shouted. "Stay down!" Glass shattered somewhere behind him. Martha screamed. Then the crack of a rifle from inside the cabin, and another scream from outside. Caleb risked a glance. Martha had taken position at the shattered window. Daniel's old rifle pressed against her shoulder. Smoke curled from the barrel. And on the ground beyond the fence, a third man lay still. 4 torches. "Martha, get back!" "Shut up and shoot!" He almost laughed. Almost. The remaining riders had regrouped behind the barn. Caleb could see their torches flickering through the gaps in the wooden walls. They were planning something. Organizing. Then he smelled smoke. Not torch smoke. Building smoke. "The barn!" Martha's voice was ragged with fear. "They're burning the barn!" Hope was in that barn. Caleb was moving before he made the conscious decision, vaulting over the porch railing and sprinting through the snow toward the growing flames. Bullets sang past him. One tugged at his coat sleeve. Another grazed his ear, leaving a line of fire across his skin. He didn't slow down. The barn door was already engulfed. He hit it with his shoulder, feeling the heat sear through his coat as the weakened wood gave way. Smoke billowed around him, thick and choking. "Hope, easy, girl!" The horse screamed somewhere in the darkness. Caleb followed the sound, his eyes streaming, his lungs burning. He found her in the back stall, rearing and plunging against the ropes that held her. He cut the ropes with his knife and grabbed her halter. "Come on! Come on!" They burst through the side door just as the roof collapsed behind them. Outside, gunfire still crackled. Martha was still shooting from the cabin. The remaining riders were circling, looking for angles of attack. Caleb slapped Hope's flank, sending her galloping toward the safety of the tree line. Then he turned and raised his rifle. 3 torches left. He fired. 2 torches. Fired again. 1 torch. The last rider, Cobb, charged toward the cabin, his torch held high and murder in his eyes. He was screaming something, words lost in the chaos of flame and gunshots. Caleb's rifle clicked empty. He drew his pistol. Cobb was 10 yards away. 5 yards. Caleb fired. The torch flew from Cobb's hand as the bullet took him in the chest. He slid from his saddle and hit the snow without a sound. Silence fell. Caleb stood in the churning snow, his pistol still raised, his chest heaving. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames leaping toward the black sky. 7 bodies littered the ground around the cabin, some still, some groaning. The cabin door burst open. Martha ran toward him, the rifle still clutched in her hands, her face wild with terror and relief. "Caleb, Caleb, are you?" He caught her as she reached him, pulling her against his chest. "I'm okay. I'm okay. The barn you went into the fire, I thought. Had to save the horse." His voice was rough with smoke and exhaustion. "Couldn't let them take everything from you." Martha pulled back to look at his face. "You stupid, brave, impossible man." "I know. You could have died." "I know." She kissed him. It happened before either of them could think about it. Her lips against his, cold and chapped and desperate. His arms tightening around her, pulling her closer as if he could protect her from everything that had happened and everything that was still coming. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. "That was," Caleb started. "Necessary," Martha finished. "I've been wanting to do that since you faced down those men this morning." "Martha, don't." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't tell me it's complicated. Don't tell me we barely know each other. I know. But I also know you just walked through fire for my family. And I know tomorrow might not come." Her eyes held his, fierce and certain. "So if you're going to tell me not to feel what I'm feeling, save your breath." Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd buried her husband and raised her daughters alone, and stood at a broken window shooting at armed men while her home burned around her. "I wasn't going to tell you that," he said quietly. "What were you going to tell me? That I don't deserve this. Don't deserve you or those girls or any of it. That I failed my own family and I might fail yours too." Martha's hands cupped his face. "Then we'll fail together. But tonight we won. Tonight we're alive. And that's enough." Behind them, Emma appeared in the cabin doorway, her face pale in the firelight. Grace and Faith huddled behind her. "Mama?" Emma's voice was small. "Is it over?" Martha turned, holding out her arms. "For tonight, baby. For tonight it's over." The girls ran to their mother, wrapping themselves around her like small anchors seeking harbor. And Caleb Stone stood in the snow, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies, watching the family he'd sworn to protect hold each other in the light of their burning barn. Not over, he thought. Not even close. But for now, for this moment, they were alive. That would have to be enough. They didn't sleep that night. Caleb dragged the bodies away from the cabin and covered them with snow. Not out of respect, out of necessity. 7 corpses frozen in the open would bring questions from anyone passing by, and questions were dangerous until Marshal Dawkins arrived. Martha tended to his wounds, the graze on his ear, the burns on his hands, from pushing through the barn door. Her touch was gentle, careful, but her eyes were troubled. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked. "I'm thinking this isn't over." "No. Garrett knows his men failed. By morning he'll know they're dead." Martha's hand stilled on the bandage she was wrapping around his palm. "He won't send hired guns next time. He'll come himself. With the sheriff. With warrants and legal authority. I know. They'll arrest you for murder. 7 counts. Maybe more if Garrett decides to get creative." Martha's voice shook. "And there's nothing I can do to stop it." "There might be something." Martha looked up. "What?" "The journal. Daniel's evidence." Caleb nodded toward the leather satchel on the table. "It's not just proof of bad materials and crooked contracts. It's proof of murder, conspiracy, bribery reaching all the way to the territorial capital. But who would believe it? Garrett controls the sheriff. He has judges in his pocket. The territorial governor is only one man." Caleb leaned forward. "There are federal authorities, U.S. Marshals who can't be bought, newspapers in Denver and Cheyenne that would pay good money for a story like this. And how do we get the evidence to them? Garrett's men watch every road out of town. We don't take it out of town." Caleb's eyes found hers. "We bring the town to us." Martha frowned. "I don't understand." "The church. Garrett built it. His name is on the cornerstone. His money paid for every rotten beam and substandard nail." Caleb's voice hardened. "Daniel's journal proves the whole building could collapse at any moment. The people in this town, they go to that church every Sunday. Their wives, their children, their parents. If they knew the truth, they'd turn against Garrett. They'd have to. It's not about politics or business deals anymore. It's about their families, their safety." Caleb reached out and took her hand. "We're not fighting alone, Martha. We just need to make people see what they've been too afraid to look at." Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression. Not hope exactly, she was too worn down for hope, but something close to it. Determination, maybe. Resolve. "Agnes Cooper," she said slowly. "What about her? She was my friend. Before Daniel died. Before Garrett made everyone afraid to be seen with me." Martha's grip tightened on his hand. "Her grandchildren were baptized in that church. Her husband goes every Sunday. If she knew, she might help us spread the truth." "She might." Martha paused. "Or she might turn us over to Garrett and hope he rewards her for it." Do you trust her? I don't know anymore. I don't know who to trust. Martha's eyes found his. Except you. I trust you. Then we try. Tomorrow before Garrett can organize his response, we go to town. We find Agnes. We show her the evidence and let her decide what to do with it. And if she betrays us, then we're no worse off than we are now. Martha almost laughed. That's a low bar. It's the only one we've got. The fire crackled. The wind howled against the walls. And somewhere in the darkness, 3 little girls finally slept, exhausted by fear and relief, and the terrible knowledge that their world had almost ended tonight. Caleb. Martha's voice was soft. What happens after? After what? After we stop Garrett. After the marshal comes. After all of this is over. She looked at him with eyes that held too much fear to voice the question directly. What happens to us? Caleb understood what she was really asking. What happens to you? Are you going to leave? I don't know, he said honestly. I've spent 4 years not thinking about after, not believing there would be an after. And now? Now. He reached out and touched her face, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. Now I want there to be an after. For the first time since Sarah and Hope died, I want to see what tomorrow looks like. Martha's breath caught. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now, the only honest one. Caleb held her gaze. But I can tell you this, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm not leaving. Not until you're safe. Not until those girls are safe. And if we survive this, if we actually manage to take down Garrett and everything he's built... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like empty promises. Then maybe we can figure out what after looks like together. Martha's hand came up to cover his where it rested on her face. Together, she repeated softly. Together. She leaned forward and kissed him again. Not the desperate, relieved kiss from earlier, but something softer. Something that tasted like the beginning of a promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. Get some rest, she said. Tomorrow's going to be hard. You too. I will. Martha stood, but she didn't move toward the bed where her daughters slept. Caleb. Yeah. Thank you. For staying. For fighting. For... She gestured helplessly at the cabin, at the snow-covered bodies outside, at everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. For all of it. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. We won tonight. That's more than I thought we'd get. Martha's smile was small and tired and beautiful. That's more than I've had in 2 years. She walked to the bed and curled up next to her daughters, pulling Faith against her chest and reaching out to touch Emma's hair. Caleb watched them for a long moment, this family that had somehow become his to protect. Then he settled into the chair by the fire, Daniel's journal in his lap, his pistol on the table beside him. He didn't expect to sleep, but somewhere in the dark hours before dawn, exhaustion claimed him anyway. And he dreamed. He dreamed of Sarah and Hope, standing in a field of roses that stretched to the horizon. Hope was laughing, spinning in circles with her arms spread wide. Sarah watched her with that soft smile she always had when their daughter was being particularly ridiculous. Daddy, Hope called out. Daddy, look at me. I see you, sweetheart, Caleb said. I see you. Sarah turned to face him. Her eyes were sad, but there was something else there too, something that looked like peace. It's okay, she said quietly. It's okay to let go. I can't. You're not letting go of us, Caleb. You're letting go of the guilt, the punishment you've been giving yourself. Sarah reached out and touched his face, and he could feel it, really feel it, the warmth of her palm against his cheek. You didn't fail us. You couldn't have saved us. Nobody could have. I should have been there. You're here now. That's what matters. Sarah's hand dropped to his heart. Those girls need a father. That woman needs a partner. And you need to stop running. Sarah. I loved you, Caleb Stone. I will always love you. And because I love you, I'm telling you live. Stop surviving and start living. Let them in." Her smile was radiant, heartbreaking. "We'll be here when it's your time, but it's not your time yet." "Daddy?" Hope ran up and threw her arms around his legs. "Daddy, don't be sad anymore. I'm okay. Mama's okay. We're happy here." Caleb knelt down and pulled his daughter into his arms, breathing in the scent of her hair roses and sunshine and everything good he'd ever known. "I miss you," he whispered. "Every day I miss you." "I know." Hope pulled back and looked at him with her mother's eyes. "But you have new people to miss you now. And they're alive, Daddy. They need you." "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you do." Hope's smile was impossibly bright. "You're my daddy. You can do anything." She kissed his cheek, and even in the dream, he felt the tears on his face. "Go back," Sarah said. "Go back and fight. Go back and live." "Go back and love," Hope added. "Love them for us. Love them the way you loved us." "I don't think You can." Sarah's voice was firm. "You already are." The field of roses began to fade. Sarah and Hope grew distant, translucent, their forms dissolving into light. "We love you, Daddy," Hope called out. "We love you forever." And then they were gone. Caleb woke with tears streaming down his face and the first gray light of dawn creeping through the windows. The fire had burned to embers, the cabin was cold, but inside his chest something had changed, something had healed. "Mr. Stone." He turned to find Grace standing beside his chair, her ancient eyes studying his face. "You were crying in your sleep," she said softly. "But they weren't sad tears. Not all the way." Caleb wiped his face with the back of his hand. "No, not all the way." Grace nodded slowly. "You saw them, your wife and your daughter." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "They told you to stay." "Yes." Grace reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were small and cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "Good," she said. "Because I already drew the picture." "What picture?" Grace pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and pressed it into his hand. It was another drawing. 5 figures standing in front of a cabin. A man, a woman, and 3 little girls. They were holding hands, and the sun was shining, and at the top, in careful, shaky letters, Grace had written 2 words: "Our family." Caleb's vision blurred. "When did you draw this?" "Last night, after the bad men went away." Grace's voice was matter-of-fact. "I saw it. When the fighting's over. When the bad men are gone forever. We're all together. All 5 of us." "Grace, you're supposed to stay, Mr. Stone. You're supposed to be our daddy now." She looked up at him with those knowing eyes. "Is that okay?" Caleb pulled her into a hug, holding her tight against his chest. "Yeah," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Yeah, that's okay." "Good." Grace hugged him back, her small arms surprisingly fierce. "Because I already told Mama. And Emma's already practicing calling you Daddy. And Faith says she's going to make you a Christmas present, even though Christmas is over, because you didn't get to have a real Christmas." Caleb laughed, a broken, wet sound that was half sob and half joy. "I had the best Christmas I've had in 4 years," he said. "I found you." Grace pulled back and smiled. It transformed her face, chasing away the ancient wisdom and leaving behind something that looked almost like an ordinary 7-year-old girl. "We found each other," she corrected. "That's what family does. They find each other, even when they don't know they're looking." The cabin door burst open. Martha stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with alarm. "Riders," she said. "Coming from town, a lot of them." Caleb was on his feet instantly, Grace safely behind him. "How many?" "At least a dozen." Martha's voice shook. "Caleb, I think it's the sheriff, and I think Garrett's with him." Caleb grabbed his pistol and moved to the window. The sun was barely up, and already the enemy was at their gates. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Caleb counted them through the frosted glass. 12 riders, maybe more. Sheriff Wade Brennan rode at the front, his badge glinting in the pale morning light, and beside him, mounted on a black stallion that probably cost more than most men earned in a year, sat Marcus Garrett. Martha. Caleb's voice was calm, steady. Take the girls to the back, same as before. Caleb, there's too many. You can't. I'm not going to fight them, not yet. He turned to face her. But I need you and the girls safe while I find out what they want. They want you dead. Maybe. But they're coming in daylight with the sheriff in front of witnesses. That means they want to do this legal. Or at least make it look legal. Martha hesitated, her eyes searching his face. Then she nodded and gathered her daughters, herding them toward the back of the cabin. Emma. Caleb's voice stopped the oldest girl. You remember where your daddy's journal is? Yes, sir? If anything happens to me, you take that journal and you run. You run to Doc Harrison's place and you don't stop for anyone. Understand? Emma's face was pale, but her chin lifted with that stubborn determination he'd come to recognize. I understand. Good girl. Caleb stepped onto the porch just as the riders reached the fence line. Sheriff Brennan held up his hand, and the group halted. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those were the eyes of a man who'd made too many compromises and knew it. Caleb Stone, he called out. That's me. I'm Sheriff Wade Brennan. I'm here to place you under arrest for the murder of 7 men. Murder. Caleb let the word hang in the cold air. That's interesting. Because what I recall is 7 armed men attacking this homestead in the middle of the night, trying to burn a woman and 3 children alive. Garrett nudged his horse forward. That's a lie. My men came here to negotiate peacefully. This madman ambushed them. Negotiate. Caleb's voice was ice. With torches and rifles, in the middle of the night. Real peaceful negotiations, Garrett. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Mr. Stone, whatever happened last night, you need to come with us. We can sort this out in town. Sort it out how? In front of a judge that Garrett owns, with witnesses too scared to testify. Caleb shook his head slowly. I don't think so, Sheriff. You're not giving me a choice here. You've got plenty of choices. You're just scared to make the right one. Brennan's face flushed. Now listen here. No, you listen. Caleb's voice cracked like a whip. Daniel Holloway was your best friend. You stood up at his wedding. You held his daughter the day she was born. And when Garrett murdered him, you looked the other way. The silence that followed was absolute. Brennan's hand trembled on his reins. Daniel's death was an accident. Daniel's death was execution, and you know it. Caleb took a step forward. He found evidence of Garrett's corruption, building contracts with rotten materials, payoffs to territorial officials, a conspiracy that reaches all the way to the Capitol. And when he tried to do the right thing, Garrett had him killed. That's slander. Garrett's face had gone purple. Sheriff, arrest this man immediately. But Brennan didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Caleb's face. You have proof? The sheriff asked quietly. I have Daniel Holloway's journal. Every name, every date, every dollar that changed hands, including the payments made to you, Sheriff. $300 last spring, $500 the fall before that. Brennan went white. Lies, Garrett snarled. He's lying. Daniel Holloway was a drunk and a thief, everyone knows. Everyone knows what you told them to know. Caleb's voice was calm, relentless. Everyone believes what they're too scared to question. But I've read that journal, Garrett. I know exactly what you've done. And so does a U.S. Marshal named Dawkins, who should be arriving from Denver any day now. Something shifted in Garrett's expression. Fear quickly suppressed. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Caleb reached into his coat. The men behind Garrett tensed hands going to their weapons, but all Caleb produced was a folded piece of paper. "Telegram receipt. Sent yesterday from Doc Harrison's office. You can check if you want." Garrett's eyes darted to Harrison's name on the paper, then to the sheriff, then back to Caleb. "This changes nothing," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "You still murdered 7 men. I defended a family from armed attackers. That's not murder, that's self-defense. We only have your word for what happened." "No." A new voice cut through the tension. "You have mine too." Caleb turned. Martha stood in the cabin doorway, her rifle cradled in her arms. Behind her, Emma, Grace, and Faith huddled together, their eyes wide but determined. "I was there," Martha said, her voice steady as stone. "I watched 7 men ride up to my home with torches and guns. I heard them threaten to burn us alive, and I shot one of them myself when he tried to break down my door." "Martha," Brennan's voice was pained. "You don't understand what you're—" "I understand perfectly, Wade." Martha stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "I understand that my husband is dead because he tried to do the right thing. I understand that you let his murderer walk free because you were too afraid to stand up. And I understand that right now you have a choice." She pointed at Garrett. "That man killed Daniel. He's been trying to steal my land. He sent armed men to murder my children, and you're standing next to him like he's the victim." Brennan's face twisted with anguish. "Martha, I choose Wade." Martha's voice cracked with grief and rage. "Right now, today, whose side are you on?" The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Caleb watched the sheriff's face, reading the battle playing out behind his eyes. Fear versus guilt. Self-preservation versus whatever shred of honor still remained. Then one of the men behind Garrett moved. "This is ridiculous." A big man with a star pinned to his vest. Deputy Caleb realized, drew his pistol. "She's lying to protect her killer boyfriend. Sheriff, let's just put that away, Rawlings." Everyone froze. Brennan's voice had changed. Something in it had hardened, crystallized. When he turned to face Garrett, his hand was resting on his own holster. "Mr. Garrett," he said slowly, "I think you and I need to have a conversation." "What?" Garrett's composure cracked. "Wade, what are you doing?" "Something I should have done 2 years ago." Brennan's jaw tightened. "I've been taking your money. Looking the other way while you destroyed people's lives. Telling myself it wasn't my problem, wasn't my business." He glanced at Martha and his eyes were wet. "But Daniel was my business. He was my brother in every way that mattered. And I let you kill him." "Wade, think about what you're doing." Garrett's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "Think about your career, your pension, everything you've built." "I haven't built anything." Brennan's voice was hollow. "I've just been surviving, and I'm tired of it." He turned to his deputies. "Any of you boys want to side with Garrett, now's the time to ride away. I won't stop you." Nobody moved. "Any of you want to help me do the right thing for once?" Rawlings, the deputy who'd drawn his weapon earlier, slowly holstered his pistol. "What do you need, Sheriff?" "I need someone to ride to Denver. Fast as possible. Find U.S. Marshal Dawkins and tell him what's happening here." Brennan paused. "And I need someone to stay here and guard this family until this is over." "I'll go to Denver." Rawlings climbed down from his horse. "I know the road, and I'll stay." Another deputy, younger with honest eyes. "My pa knew Daniel Holloway. Said he was the best man in the territory. I'd be honored to help his family." Garrett's face had gone from purple to white. "You can't do this. I have connections. The territorial governor." "The territorial governor is about to have bigger problems than you," Brennan said quietly. "If what Stone says is true, if Daniel really documented everything, then a lot of powerful people are about to fall. and I'd rather be standing on the right side when it happens. You're making a mistake, Wade. A fatal mistake. Maybe. Brennan's hand moved to his handcuffs. Marcus Garrett, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and corruption of public officials. You have no authority. I have all the authority I need. The handcuffs clicked shut around Garrett's wrists. I'm the sheriff of this county, and I'm finally doing my job. Garrett's men looked at each other uncertainly. Without their boss's money and influence protecting them, they were just hired hands facing armed lawmen. Anyone want to try something? Brennan asked mildly. One by one they raised their hands. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It was over. Except it wasn't. Sheriff. The young deputy who'd volunteered to guard the family was pointing toward the road. More riders coming fast. Caleb spun around. A single horseman was galloping toward them, pushing his mount hard through the snow. As he got closer, Caleb could make out a badge on his chest. Not a local star, but the distinctive shield of a federal marshal. Dawkins. It had to be, but that was impossible. The telegram couldn't have reached Denver yet. Even if Dawkins had left immediately, the rider reined in hard, his horse nearly sitting back on its haunches. He was younger than Caleb expected, early 30s, with the hard eyes of a man who'd seen too much violence and hadn't flinched. Which one of you is Stone? He demanded. That's me. I'm Deputy Marshal Thomas Reeves out of the Denver office. He was breathing hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Marshal Dawkins sent me ahead when he got your telegram. He's 2 days behind with a full warrant party. How? Dawkins has been building a case against Garrett for 6 months. Your telegram was the break he needed. Reeves's eyes swept the scene, the arrested banker, the sheriff with new steel in his spine, the family clustered on the cabin porch. Looks like I'm not too late after all. Martha made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She sank to her knees in the snow, her daughters immediately swarming around her. Mama, Faith's voice was frightened. Mama, what's wrong? Nothing, baby. Martha pulled all 3 girls into her arms. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. For the first time in 2 years, everything's finally right. Caleb moved to stand beside her. His hand found her shoulder and squeezed. It's over, he said quietly. Martha looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Is it really? Yeah. Caleb knelt down, bringing himself level with her and the girls. Yeah, it's really over. Emma launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. You did it. You saved us. We saved us, Caleb corrected, holding her tight. All of us together. Grace pressed against his side, her hand finding his. Faith wiggled between them, determined not to be left out. And Martha just looked at him with those fierce, beautiful eyes that had seen too much pain and still found the strength to hope. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Caleb's voice was rough with emotion. We've still got a lot to figure out. I know. But right now, Martha reached out and touched his face. Right now, I just want to be grateful that you stopped at our fence. I didn't stop. Caleb's throat was tight. Your daughters wouldn't let go of my boot. Emma giggled through her tears. I told you God was sending us someone. You did. Caleb pulled back to look at all 3 girls, these fierce, brave, impossible children, who had somehow saved him as much as he'd saved them. You told me, and I didn't believe you. But you were right. Are you going to stay now? Faith asked, her small face serious. Forever and ever. Caleb looked at Martha. She looked back at him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. What do you want? She asked softly. I want... The words caught in his throat. He thought of Sarah and Hope, of the dream, where they'd told him to let go and love again. He thought of 4 years of running, of emptiness, of wishing he'd died with his family. And he thought of this moment, this woman, these girls. I want to stay, he said finally. If you'll have me. Martha's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "We'll have you," she said. "We've been waiting for you." Grace tugged at his sleeve. "I knew you'd stay. I drew the picture. Remember the one with 5 people?" "I remember." "You're the 5th person. You've always been the 5th person." Grace's ancient eyes were shining. "Daddy told me so." Caleb pulled her close and pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Then I guess it's settled," he said. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the last wisps of fog. Deputy Marshal Reeves was organizing the prisoners. Sheriff Brennan was giving orders to his men with a clarity and purpose he probably hadn't felt in years. And on the porch of a small cabin surrounded by the remnants of the night's violence, a broken man held 3 little girls and finally allowed himself to imagine a future. "Mr. Stone." Reeves approached his expression businesslike. "I'm going to need statements from everyone. The whole story from the beginning." "You'll get them." "And the evidence. The journal you mentioned." "Safe." Caleb nodded toward the cabin. "We'll turn it over to Marshal Dawkins when he arrives." "Good." Reeves hesitated. "For what it's worth, Dawkins told me about you, about what happened in Texas." Caleb went still. "He said you were the best deputy he ever had. Said losing you was like losing his own son." Reeves met his eyes. "He also said if anyone could survive this mess and come out the other side, it would be you. Dawkins always did have too much faith in people. Maybe. Or maybe he just knows a good man when he sees one." Reeves tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Caleb standing with Martha and the girls. "You were a deputy?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "A real deputy?" "A long time ago." "Why'd you stop?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Because something bad happened. And I didn't know how to keep going after that." "But you know now." It wasn't a question. Grace's voice was certain. "You know how to keep going now." "Yeah." Caleb looked at Martha, at Emma, at Grace, at Faith. "Yeah, I think I do." They went inside to escape the cold. Martha made coffee while the girls clung to Caleb like they were afraid he might disappear if they let go. "Mama," Faith said suddenly, "I'm hungry." Martha laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and alive. "Of course you are, baby. You haven't eaten since yesterday." "I could eat a whole horse," Emma declared. "Let's start with breakfast and work our way up." Caleb watched Martha move around the cabin gathering food, stoking the fire, gently shooing the girls toward the table. She was still weak, he could see it in the careful way she moved, but the medicine was working. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her breathing came easier. She was going to be okay. They were all going to be okay. "Need help?" he asked. Martha turned to look at him. For a long moment she just studied his face, as if memorizing every line and shadow. "With breakfast, or with everything else?" "Everything else." Her smile was soft. "I'd like that." "So would I." They ate together. The 5 of them crowded around the small table like they'd been doing it for years instead of hours. Faith insisted on sitting in Caleb's lap. Emma argued with Grace about who got the last biscuit. Martha watched them all with an expression that made Caleb's chest ache. Home. This was what home felt like. He'd forgotten. "What happens now?" Emma asked through a mouthful of eggs. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Martha said automatically. Emma swallowed. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," Caleb said. "The marshal from Denver is coming. He's going to help put Garrett away for good. And once that's done..." He glanced at Martha. "Once that's done, we figure out the rest." "What kind of rest?" Grace asked. "Well, you've got a barn that needs rebuilding, a farm that needs tending, a family that needs..." Caleb stopped suddenly, uncertain. "A father," Martha finished quietly. "A family that needs a father." Emma's eyes went wide. "Does that mean..." "It means we're going to take things one day at a time." Martha reached across the table and took Caleb's hand. "But yes, if you want him to stay, he's going to stay. Forever. Faith asked. Martha looked at Caleb. He looked back at her. Forever, he said. The girls erupted into cheers. Faith threw her arms around his neck. Emma bounced in her seat. Even Grace solemn quiet. Grace was grinning, and Martha just sat there holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. I love you, she said quietly. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I love you, Caleb Stone. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. I love you too, he said. I didn't think I'd ever say those words again. But I love you, Martha Holloway, and I love your girls, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Promise. The kiss that followed was soft and sweet, and full of all the promises they couldn't put into words. When they finally broke apart, 3 little girls were giggling and pretending to cover their eyes. Gross, Emma declared, but she was smiling. The grossest, Grace agreed. Faith just climbed back into Caleb's lap and settled against his chest with a contented sigh. This is nice, she said drowsily. This is the nicest Christmas ever. Christmas was 2 days ago, sweetheart. I know, but it still feels like Christmas. Faith yawned. Because you're here, because we're all together. That's what Christmas is supposed to feel like, right? Caleb's arms tightened around her. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. That's exactly what it's supposed to feel like. Outside, the sun continued to rise. The deputies were loading prisoners into a wagon. Sheriff Brennan was talking to Deputy Marshal Reeves, his posture straighter than it had been in years. And somewhere on the road from Denver, a federal marshal was coming with warrants and authority and the power to finally bring justice to a territory that had been without it for far too long. But inside the small cabin, none of that mattered. What mattered was the fire crackling in the hearth, the smell of breakfast, the warmth of 3 little girls and their mother gathered around a table that suddenly felt complete. What mattered was the family Caleb Stone had thought he'd never have again. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Caleb was on his feet instantly, hand going to his holster. Mr. Stone? Deputy Marshal Reeves's voice came through the wood. Got something you need to see. Someone just rode in, says he knows you. Caleb exchanged a glance with Martha. She nodded, gathering the girls behind her. He opened the door. Standing on the porch covered in trail dust and looking like he'd ridden through hell itself was a man Caleb hadn't seen in 4 years, Marshal James Dawkins. Hello, son, Dawkins said quietly. I got here as fast as I could. Caleb couldn't speak, couldn't move. I know what you're thinking, Dawkins continued. I know you think I gave up on you after Sarah and Hope died. But I never gave up, Caleb. I've been looking for you ever since you disappeared, tracking you across 3 territories, always one step behind. Why? Because you're the best man I ever trained. Because you deserve better than the guilt you've been carrying. And because... Dawkins' voice cracked. Because Sarah was my daughter. And those outlaws who killed her, I found them, Caleb. Every last one. They're dead or in prison. Justice was done. Caleb felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Your daughter. We never told you. Sarah didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything, but yes, my daughter. Dawkins' eyes were wet. And Hope was my granddaughter. Your family, Caleb. You always have been. Caleb grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. I didn't know. I know you didn't. Sarah wanted it that way. Dawkins took a step forward. But I'm telling you now because you need to understand you didn't fail them. You didn't fail anyone. And whatever happened here, whatever you've found with this family... He glanced past Caleb to where Martha and the girls stood watching. You deserve it. You deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way. Martha moved to stand beside Caleb. Her hand found his and held tight. You're his father-in-law, she asked. I was. I suppose I still am in a way. Dawkins looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. You must be Martha. I read the telegram. I know what Garrett did to your husband. I'm sorry. Thank you. And these must be the girls who started all this trouble. Dawkins' weathered face broke into a smile. The ones who grabbed a stranger's boot and wouldn't let go. Emma stepped forward, her chin lifted. We didn't start trouble. We asked for help, and he helped. That he did. Dawkins knelt down, bringing himself to her level. Your daddy would be proud of you, all three of you. Takes courage to ask for help. Takes even more courage to believe it'll come. Grace knew. Emma pointed at her sister. She saw it in a dream. Dawkins looked at Grace with new interest. Did she now? Grace nodded solemnly. I see things sometimes, things that haven't happened yet. That's a gift, young lady, a rare one. Dawkins straightened. You take care of that gift, and take care of this man here. He put his hand on Caleb's shoulder. He's been through a lot. He's going to need you. We need him too, Faith piped up. He's going to be our new daddy. Mama said so. Dawkins's eyebrows rose. He looked from Faith to Martha to Caleb. Is that so? Caleb found his voice at last. It's so. If that's... He swallowed. If that's all right with you. Dawkins was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled Caleb into a fierce embrace. It's more than all right, he said roughly. It's exactly what Sarah would have wanted. She always said you had too much love to keep it locked up in grief forever. Caleb hugged him back, feeling something release in his chest that he hadn't even known was still holding on. I miss her, he whispered. Every day. I miss them both. I know, son. I know. Dawkins pulled back his hands, still gripping Caleb's shoulders. But missing them doesn't mean you can't love again. It just means you carry them with you. In here. He tapped Caleb's chest. Always. Martha's hand found Caleb's again. He's right, she said softly. Daniel's still here too. In me. In the girls. In this home he built. Love doesn't end just because someone's gone. It just changes shape. Grace nodded. That's what Daddy said. In my dream. He said love gets bigger. Big enough to hold new people. Caleb looked at his family, old and new, lost, and found past and future. And for the first time in 4 years, he believed it might actually be true. The days that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of testimony, documentation, and justice long delayed. Marshal Dawkins took control with the efficiency of a man who'd been waiting years for this moment. He secured Daniel Holloway's journal as federal evidence. He took statements from everyone who'd witnessed Garrett's crimes, and he sent writers to the territorial capital with warrants for every official whose name appeared in those damning pages. The town of Cedar Falls transformed overnight. People who'd been afraid to speak suddenly found their voices. Agnes Cooper came forward with stories of intimidation and threats. Doc Harrison testified about the wounds he'd seen on Daniel's body, wounds inconsistent with a simple fall. Even Reverend Miller, the young preacher who'd been building his church with Garrett's blood money, stood in the town square and publicly denounced the man who'd corrupted his ministry. But it was Sheriff Brennan's testimony that sealed Garrett's fate. I took his money, Brennan said, his voice carrying across the packed courtroom. I looked the other way when he destroyed people's lives. I told myself I was just surviving, just doing what I had to do to keep my job and my family safe. He looked directly at Martha. But survival ain't living. And what I did, what I let happen to Daniel, to his family, that wasn't survival. That was cowardice. Martha's hand found Caleb's and squeezed. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Brennan continued. I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for the chance to make things right, to tell the truth finally about what Marcus Garrett has done to this town and everyone in it. The judge, a federal appointee brought in from Denver, beyond Garrett's reach, nodded slowly. Proceed, Sheriff. And Brennan did. For 3 hours he laid out every crime he'd witnessed, every bribe he'd accepted, every order he'd followed that had led to innocent people suffering. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. Garrett sat at the defense table, his face gray, his expensive clothes hanging loose on a frame that seemed to have aged 20 years in the span of a week. His lawyers had abandoned him one by one as the evidence mounted. Even his own family had refused to attend the trial. He was alone, just like the people he'd destroyed. Marcus Garrett. The judge's voice was cold. You have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, bribery of public officials, and numerous other charges. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? Garrett stood slowly. His eyes found Caleb in the gallery. You think you've won, he said quietly. You think this is over, but men like me don't just disappear. The money, the power, the connections, they don't go away because a judge says so. Is that a threat, Mr. Garrett? It's a promise. Garrett's voice hardened. To everyone in this room, this isn't over. It will never be over. On the contrary. The judge's gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. Marcus Garrett, I sentence you to hang by the neck until dead, sentenced to be carried out at dawn on the first day of the new year. The courtroom erupted. Garrett screamed something, threats, curses, promises of revenge. But the deputies were already dragging him away. His voice faded as they hauled him toward the jail, leaving behind only the echo of a man who'd finally run out of power. Martha buried her face against Caleb's shoulder. It's done, she whispered. It's really done. Yeah. Caleb held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. It's done. Emma tugged at his sleeve. Does this mean the bad man can't hurt us anymore? That's exactly what it means. Forever. Forever. Grace stood apart, her expression unreadable. Caleb reached out and drew her into the embrace. You okay? He asked quietly. Grace nodded slowly. I saw this, she said. In my dream. The man in chains. The wooden thing they hang people from. She shuddered. I didn't like seeing it. You don't have to think about it anymore. I know. Grace looked up at him with those ancient eyes. But I wanted you to know I don't see any more bad things. Not for us. Just good things now. What kind of good things? Grace smiled. It was a rare expression on her solemn face, and it transformed her completely. The kind I can't tell you about, she said. Because then they won't be surprises. Faith wiggled between them, determined as always not to be left out. I want to go home, she announced. I'm tired and I want to go home. Martha laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and alive. Then let's go home. They walked out of the courthouse together, the five of them, into the pale winter sunshine. The townspeople parted to let them pass, and Caleb saw something in their faces he hadn't expected. Respect. Agnes Cooper stepped forward and caught Martha's hands. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry I wasn't braver. I should have stood by you. I should have... You're standing by me now. Martha pulled her into a hug. That's what matters. One by one others approached. Men who'd worked with Daniel. Women who'd been Martha's friends before fear drove them away. Children who'd played with Emma and Grace and Faith before their father's murder made them outcasts. Welcome back, someone said. We're sorry, said another. We should have done something sooner. We were scared, but that's no excuse. The apologies washed over them like rain after a drought. Martha accepted each one with grace and dignity, but Caleb could see the toll it was taking. 2 years of isolation couldn't be erased in an afternoon. Let's get you home, he murmured in her ear. She nodded gratefully. The ride back to the cabin was quiet. The girls dozed in the wagon bed, exhausted by the emotions of the day. Martha sat beside Caleb on the driver's seat, her head resting on his shoulder. What happens now? She asked. Now we rebuild. The barn. Everything. Caleb kissed the top of her head. The barn. The farm. Our lives. Our lives. Martha smiled. I like the sound of that. So do I. They reached the cabin as the sun was setting. Caleb carried Faith inside while Martha herded the older girls toward their beds. The evening routine was becoming familiar. Washing up, changing clothes, the endless negotiations about bedtime. 5 more minutes, Emma pleaded. You said that 5 minutes ago. But I'm not tired. You fell asleep in the wagon. That was different. Caleb hid his smile. Sarah and Hope had had the same arguments what felt like a lifetime ago. The memory didn't hurt the way it used to. It was softer now, bittersweet instead of devastating. How about a story? He offered. Emma's eyes lit up. A real story about cowboys and outlaws and adventures. If you get in bed right now. Emma was under the covers before he finished speaking. Grace and Faith followed, arranging themselves on either side of their sister. Caleb settled into the chair by the bed. Once upon a time, he began, there was a cowboy who thought he'd lost everything. Was he sad? Faith asked. He was the saddest man in the whole world. He'd been riding alone for a long time and he'd forgotten what it felt like to have a home. That's terrible, Emma said. It was, but then one day something happened. What? He met 3 little girls who wouldn't let go of his boot. Grace smiled. I know this story. Then you know what happened next. He stayed, Grace said softly, because they needed him, and because he needed them too. That's right. Caleb's voice was rough. He stayed, and those 3 little girls taught him something he'd forgotten. What? Faith asked. That love doesn't run out. It just gets bigger, big enough to hold new people, big enough to heal old wounds, big enough to make a broken man whole again. The girls were quiet. Is that how the story ends? Emma asked. No. Caleb reached out and tucked the blanket around them. That's how it begins. He kissed each of them on the forehead, Emma, then Grace, then Faith, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 4 years. Good night, girls. Good night, Daddy. The word hit him like a lightning bolt. He turned back to find Emma watching him with careful eyes. Is that okay? She asked hesitantly. Mama said we could call you that if we wanted to, but only if you wanted us to. Caleb couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. It's okay if you don't want us to. Emma continued, her voice smaller now. We understand. We know you had a real daughter and we're not trying to... Yes. Emma blinked. Yes. Yes, it's okay. Yes, you can call me that. Yes to everything. Caleb's voice cracked. I would be honored to be your daddy. All 3 of you. Faith immediately scrambled out of bed and launched herself at him. Grace followed more slowly, but her arms around his waist were just as fierce. Emma stayed in bed, but her smile could have lit up the whole territory. I knew you'd say yes, she said. I prayed for it. Every night since you came. I prayed God would let you stay forever. And here I am. Here you are. Martha appeared in the doorway. She was crying, but her smile was radiant. I'm sorry, she said. I was listening. I couldn't help it. Don't be sorry. Caleb held out his hand. Come here. She crossed the room and joined their embrace, 5 people holding on to each other in the fading light. This is what I saw, Grace whispered. In my very first dream about you. This moment. All of us together. Is this the ending? Faith asked. No, baby. Martha's voice was thick with tears. This is the beginning. The weeks turned into months. Caleb rebuilt the barn with help from neighbors who were eager to make amends. The structure rose from the ashes stronger than before, a testament to what could be accomplished when good people worked together. Martha's health improved steadily. The medicine had done its work, but it was more than that. The weight she'd been carrying for 2 years, the fear, the grief, the constant threat of destruction, had finally lifted. She laughed more. smiled more. The lines of worry around her eyes began to fade. The girls flourished. Emma threw herself into farm work, with fierce determination insisting that she was old enough to help with everything. Grace remained quiet and watchful, but her strange visions had stopped since Garrett's conviction. She seemed lighter now, unburdened. And Faith. Faith followed Caleb everywhere like a small shadow chattering constantly about everything and nothing. "Daddy, look at this rock I found. Daddy, can we have a puppy? Daddy, why is the sky blue? Daddy, I love you." That last one never got old. Spring arrived early that year. The snow melted, the creek began to flow, and the first green shoots pushed up through the dark earth. Caleb was working on the fence one morning when Marshall Dawkins rode up the drive. "Morning, son." "Marshall." Caleb set down his hammer. "Everything all right?" "More than all right." Dawkins dismounted and handed over an envelope. "This came for you, from the Territorial Governor's office." Caleb opened it and read the contents, then read them again. "This can't be right." "It's right. The silver deposit under this land turns out it's worth more than anyone knew. The Territorial Surveyor's Office is offering to buy the mineral rights. That number at the bottom? That's not a mistake." Caleb looked at the figure, looked at Dawkins, looked back at the figure. "This is enough to set this family up for life. Enough to send those girls to the best schools in the territory. Enough to build whatever you want to build here." Dawkins smiled. "Daniel Holloway died protecting this secret. Seems only right that his family should finally benefit from it." Martha appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Caleb, what's going on?" He crossed the yard in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet. "Caleb, what?" "We're rich." Martha laughed. "What?" "The silver, Daniel's silver. The Territorial Office wants to buy the mineral rights, and they're offering—" He told her the number. Martha went very still. "That can't be right." "That's what I said." Caleb set her down, but kept his arms around her. "But it is. It's real. We're going to be okay, Martha. More than okay. We're going to be fine." Martha burst into tears. The girls came running at the sound, crowding around their mother in alarm. "Mama, what's wrong?" "Nothing, babies." Martha gathered them close. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Everything's finally right." Dawkins watched from his horse, his weathered face soft with satisfaction. "I'll leave you to celebrate," he said. "But there's one more thing." Caleb looked up. "The Territorial Marshal's office is looking for good men. Honest men. Men who know how to fight for what's right and aren't afraid to stand up against corruption. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a badge, same one you used to wear if you want it." Dawkins paused. "Of course you'd have to leave the territory now and then, track down bad men, risk your life for strangers." Caleb looked at Martha, at Emma, Grace, and Faith. "I don't know if—" "Don't answer now." Dawkins gathered his reins. "Think about it. Talk it over with your family. But know this, you're a good man, Caleb Stone. One of the best I've ever known. And the world could use more men like you." He tipped his hat and rode away. That night, gathered around the dinner table, Caleb told the girls about Dawkins' offer. "You'd be a marshal again." Emma's eyes were wide. "Like in the stories." "Maybe, if that's what we decide." "But you'd have to leave." Grace's voice was quiet. "You'd have to go away sometimes." "I would." "But you'd always come back." It wasn't a question. "I know you would. I can see it." Martha reached across the table and took Caleb's hand. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to be here, with you, with the girls. I want to watch them grow up. I want to build something that lasts." "But," Caleb sighed, "but I also want to make sure other families don't go through what we went through. What you went through with Garrett. What I went through in Texas. You can't save everyone." "No, but I can try to save some." He met her eyes. if you'll let me." Martha was quiet for a long moment. "Daniel used to say that some things were worth fighting for," she said finally. "Worth risking everything for. I didn't understand it then. I thought he was being selfish, choosing principle over his family. And now? Now I understand." Martha's grip tightened on his hand. "You're not choosing between us and the badge. You're choosing to be the kind of man worth loving, the kind of man who stands up when others look away. Does that mean? It means if you want to wear that badge again, I'll support you. We'll support you." Martha looked at her daughters. "All of us." "But you have to promise," Emma said fiercely. "Promise you'll always come back." Caleb looked at her, at Grace, at Faith. "I promise." "On your honor as a cowboy." "On my honor as your father." Emma nodded solemnly. "Then it's okay. You can be a marshal." "Thank you for your permission," Caleb said gravely. Grace smiled. "You should take it. The badge. I saw you wearing it. In my dream. I thought you weren't having visions anymore. This wasn't a vision, it was just a dream." Grace shrugged. "But it felt true." Faith had been quiet through the whole conversation. Now she climbed down from her chair and walked around the table to Caleb. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart." "When you go away to catch bad men, can I come with you?" Caleb laughed and pulled her into his lap. "Not until you're a little bigger." "How much bigger?" "A lot bigger." "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair sometimes." Faith considered this. "Okay. But when I'm big enough, I'm going to be a marshal too. And I'm going to catch all the bad men. Every single one." "I believe you will." Martha stood and began clearing the table. "All right, future marshals. Time for bed." "But..." "No buts. We've got a big day tomorrow." "What's happening tomorrow?" Martha glanced at Caleb. He saw the question in her eyes and nodded. "Tomorrow," Martha said, "we're going to town. To see Reverend Miller." Emma frowned. "Why?" Caleb stood Faith still in his arms. "Because I have something very important to ask your mother, and I'd like to do it properly, in a church, in front of God and everyone." It took a moment. Then Emma's face split into the biggest grin Caleb had ever seen. "You're going to marry her? If she'll have me. Mama say yes." Martha was laughing and crying at the same time. "I haven't been asked yet." Caleb set Faith down and crossed to Martha. He took her hands in his and knelt on the worn wooden floor. "Martha Jane Holloway, I came to your fence on Christmas morning expecting to ride past and never look back. Your daughters wouldn't let me. You wouldn't let me. And I'm grateful every day that you didn't." His voice cracked. "I've been broken, lost, running from everything that mattered because I was too afraid to feel anything again. You gave me back my heart, you and these 3 amazing girls. You showed me that love doesn't end. It just changes shape." Martha's tears fell onto their joined hands. "I can't promise you perfect. I can't promise you easy. But I can promise you this: every day I have left on this earth I'll spend loving you, protecting you, being the husband and father you deserve." He paused. "Martha Jane Holloway, will you marry me?" "Yes." Martha pulled him to his feet and into her arms. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The girls swarmed them all, talking at once, jumping and laughing and crying. "We're going to be a real family. Mama's getting married. Does this mean I get to wear a pretty dress? Can I be the flower girl? Can I walk Mama down the aisle? I want to throw the rice." Caleb held them all, his family, his future, his reason for finally stopping the long ride that had carried him through 4 years of darkness. "We're already a real family," he said. "This just makes it official." 6 months later, they stood in the newly rebuilt church, the one constructed with honest materials and honest labor, the one that would stand for generations. Reverend Miller spoke the words. Martha wore wildflowers in her hair. The girls stood beside her in matching dresses they'd picked out themselves. And Caleb Stone, former deputy marshal, former broken man, former ghost, riding through the wilderness with nothing but grief for company, said, "I do," and meant it with every fiber of his being. The town of Cedar Falls celebrated until dawn. That night, after the girls were finally asleep and the last of the well-wishers had gone home, Caleb and Martha sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Happy?" Martha asked. "More than I ever thought I could be again." "No regrets. Only one." Martha turned to look at him. "What?" "That I almost kept riding. That Christmas morning at your fence, I almost kept going." Caleb's voice was rough. "I almost missed all of this." "But you didn't." "No, because 3 little girls grabbed my boot and wouldn't let go." Martha leaned her head against his shoulder. "They knew. Even then they knew you were supposed to be ours." "Did you know?" "I suspected." Martha smiled. "When you walked through fire to save a horse, I was pretty sure. When you faced down 7 men to protect us, I was certain. And now? Now I know that some things are meant to be, that love finds a way even through the darkest times, that broken people can be made whole again if they're brave enough to let someone in." Caleb pulled her closer. "I love you, Mrs. Stone." "I love you too, Mr. Stone." They sat in silence, watching the stars fade as dawn approached. In the cabin behind them, 3 little girls slept peacefully for the first time in 2 years. In the barn, Hope whickered softly content in her warm stall. And in Caleb's chest, where grief and guilt had lived for so long, something new had taken root. Peace, hope, home. He'd ridden 1,000 miles running from his past. He'd been certain he'd never feel anything again. But on a frozen Christmas morning, a broken cowboy had stopped at a stranger's fence. 3 little girls had grabbed his boot and asked him to be their daddy. And against all odds, against all reason, against everything he'd believed about himself, he'd said yes. That yes had saved them all. Some doors once closed stay closed forever. But others stay open, waiting for the people who need them most, ready to welcome them in from the storm. Caleb Stone had finally found his door, and he was never going to let it close again.